Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense, where me and John talk about pro wrestling and all the stuff that entails. And there's a lot. So recently, they introduced a new United States Championship belt design on what is it, Raw? That the
Yes, Monday
United
Night Raw.
States Championship is on. I'm so forgetful in my old age. Also because I don't really watch the shows anymore. So like it could be on either show, fucking who knows. But they came up with a new design for the United States Championship very recently. I think only a couple of weeks ago, right? As of this recording.
Yeah, it's just within the last month or so.
So at some point, very recently. So what do you think of it?
I think it's all right actually. Like there's elements of the old WCW United States title about it, but with a bit of it's almost like it's crossed over with like the old WWE version as well. Like with the eagle on the front and then the sort of American flag kind of showing up on the front as well. Like the only thing that kind of looks a bit odd to me is like the top bit with all the jewels, which I guess are supposed to be like the stars and stuff. Like surely that should be blue behind that to go with the flag theme, but like I mean in terms of like some of the newer WWE titles they've introduced over the last few years, I think it's one of the better ones.
I mean, it looks nice. It does still look a little bit like the way that their championships are starting to look these days. They look a little bit kind of chunky.
Yes.
That's the way I'm going to say it. Like, there's not a whole lot of design on the belts, but the design that is there is quite blocky and quite like not so intricate. It's quite like easy for your eyes to digest.
Yeah.
If you catch my drift, which some people say is like looks like a toy, and I can see that. But some of them, like the United States Championship, like you said, I think that's one that they've got the design quite well on. It's quite minimalist and quite simple, but it also looks very nice, very neat. Not quite what you would expect the United States Championship to look like, because you would expect it to be emblazoned with the American flag like the old belt was.
Yeah.
So it's quite the departure, I think. And it is a plus that it does look like it'd be very easy to market as a children's toy.
Of course, yeah.
That's a real plus. I'll put a picture of like the old and the new United States Championships up on the show so that people can see what we're talking about right now. Just because I'm not considerate, that's the kind of quality show you're gonna get, on YouTube, and we give this away for free. Can you believe that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible.
It is incredible. So like with this new United States Championship, you could kind of put it up against like the Universal Championship or the WWE Championship, and they have a similar design. If you know where I'm coming, or like a similar aesthetic.
Yes.
They don't look the same, but there are similarities there, as if they're kind of following a bit of a formula, and then other things have been tweaked. The same with the women's championships as well. They have a similar look to that, a similar kind of aesthetic. And it's interesting that not that long ago they introduced the new Intercontinental Championship and the new Cruiserweight Championship as well.
Yeah.
And they still look quite traditional. They look a little bit more intricate, with more kind of designs on the front plate, which looks, they also end up standing out when you compare them to the other belts, which I like. And also the tag team championships still. I know people didn't like the designs, but I'm like, yeah, but they look unique. They stand out, and they didn't look terrible. I quite liked the SmackDown ones.
What is that? Are they still using the ones with like the sort of Spartan helmets on the front, or have they changed those?
I believe so, yeah. But they're silver, I think. They used to be like pennies.
Yeah.
I think they're still silver. I should double check that. But I like that design because it stands out and it kind of tells you like that's a tag team division belt, so they don't look exactly the same as the men's singles championships because they're not. They're the tag team championships. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I dig that. It's nice. It's smart. Like design choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the SmackDown ones are silver with the blue, strap. And I think they look pretty sleek the way they are. When they did look like pennies, it looked a little like the bronze. It looked like that's how they viewed their tag team championships.
Yeah.
Like you're not even gold, you're not silver, you're a solid third place. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's a good message to send to other tag teams. But the silver ones look quite nice. I like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I like a nice, unique looking championship. You don't want them to look too samey. You want them to stand out.
Yeah, and that's like the problem that they've got at the moment, really, with like the WWE Championship, the Universal Championship, and even like the two women's titles as well. They all are essentially like the same design, but with like different combinations of like the women's titles have the sort of white straps and but like they still like both have like the red background for Raw and blue background for SmackDown, so it's all like there's nothing that really pops about them or makes those championships really stand out anymore.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. Again, I think that's just like a little kind of brand uniformity where they say like the two brands are competing against each other, but really they're not. They're just two sections of the same arm.
Mm.
I don't know if that's a correct phrase. I don't think anybody's ever said two sections of the same arm. But you know what I mean? It's like before that, whenever you had like the old, the big gold belt, the World Heavyweight Championship, and then you had the other one, like the WWE Championship.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like they were two different shows because the belts on the different shows were different and unique, and you could tell the difference between the two. It wasn't color coded.
Yeah.
It wasn't spelled out for you that way, but you knew which champion was on which show because of the championship they held.
Mm-hmm.
And it became quite clear, even the first time they did this, that they weren't the biggest fans of the brand split.
Yeah.
So doesn't it make a lot more sense for a big company like that to kind of make a lot of their belts uniformly similar, because it saves on branding, it saves on like design elements and other, like for example the toys, but other merchandising things as well. They have these similar looking belts that are easy to kind of that look very nice, very professional. They don't look like an old timey wrestling belt. A lot of these don't. So they have that kind of sheen that the WWE are looking for. Like you and me can both agree that anybody clinging to the WWE hoping for like any kind of old timey connotations were probably barking up the wrong tree with that. They've moved on,
Yes, it is very much of this century now, isn't it?
Yes, it's definitely they've evolved and they've found their place in the entertainment business, and that just helps them keep a little sheen on it. So they have these very nice looking belts that at the same time are also very modern and very sleek and very kind of cool. Like you've seen them handing out these belts to NFL players and other sports stars and stuff like that, and it makes for a great photo with this lovely looking professional looking belt over their shoulder. And wrestling purists like you and I could argue that it would look even better with the old style like Golden Eagle Championship over their shoulder.
Yeah.
Like that would look really cool. But it's like a different ball game. It's a whole different, it's a whole different thing now with those belts. A lot of people like hang their belts up and stuff like that. Have you seen that? They have a little trophy room. They hang their belts up.
I've seen, people putting them on shelves and stuff, and like having big stacks of them, essentially, like all together and stuff. But yeah.
Do you own a professional wrestling championship belt? A replica? Because no offense, but I believe that you're not a a real professional wrestler. So I don't know if you've had the chance to win a championship yet, but one of the replicas you can purchase them online, I imagine.
Well, not really, but I did have one as a kid, which was, this is going back to the early 90s, where it was a kind of replica belt. Like, it wasn't even made out of foam or anything. It was like a cheap plastic kind of for the belt plate, and then it had like a foil sticker over the top of it, with like the winged eagle design on it, and then like a really cheap sort of flimsy belt which had Velcro on and eventually broke. So ended up putting like a actual belt loop through the back of the plastic to kind of still be able to wear it, but I don't know where that's gone. So I wish I still had that.
I have the Intercontinental Championship somewhere.
Oh,
not
nice.
not a proper replica. I wish. Like, I love this belt, and if I had enough money to like actually buy a replica belt, I think I would buy this one, the Intercontinental Championship from the late 90s on until probably, like, when did they change that? The late when did Cody Rhodes have it?
11, 12, something
yeah,
like that.
that's the time I was thinking of, 2010 or 11. So, I've always loved that belt design.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, I had like a little toy that you would get, which sounds a little no offense, but sounds a little bit more upmarket than the one you had.
Yep.
It just sounds like, you used to get them out of Tesco's for like £20 or something. And they had like a soft plastic, not foam, but like a soft plastic for the leather bit.
Yeah.
And then like a harder plastic for the Intercontinental Championship plates. And it was really cool. I'm like, oh, I'm the fucking man here for this belt, But I don't own any of the proper replicas. Although I do know a guy who does have a couple of those belts. He has three of those. He has the old United States Championship. Now that we're talking about it, he has the what do you call it? The Undisputed Championship.
Mm-hmm.
Which, to be fair, is a beautiful, beautiful belt.
Yeah.
I really like the design of that. It really did look like a proper, like, fucking heavyweight championship. And I think the other one he has is the old heavyweight championship from the 90s.
The big gold belt, or the...
No. Oh, yes, it is that one. Yes, it is. Because he let me wear it. It's a big gold belt. Yeah. And it didn't fit me.
Oh, no way.
I was too thin at the time. So I don't want to talk about this whole thing too much because, because it involves somebody else. So I'm like, let's leave him out of this. But I know that those belts were very expensive when he bought them. Very, very expensive. So I, since then, have had, I know my own financial situation, and it's not so good. So I'm not going to be spending, which effectively was a triple digits.
Yeah.
And like on the high end of triple digits too, just to buy a wrestling belt. I'm like, I haven't hit the jackpot just yet.
Yeah, and it's like, when are you going to wear this as well?
Very rarely.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to go to the pub on a Saturday night wearing your championship belt.
Exactly. This guy doesn't even drink, so he doesn't go to the bar. I'm like, wasted opportunity, man. What the fuck? You've got 3 of these belts. You're not going to wear. He would wear them at events. He used to go to the events and bring it. But he always would bring the United States Championship with him. I'm like, you have 2 heavyweight championship belts. Don't you want to pretend you're the heavyweight champion? Like, what? Fucking no. Anyway, so I thought we could, maybe chat about some of your favorite belt designs. I think we've kind of covered a couple of them already.
Yeah.
Because for me, I think that I always liked the old Intercontinental Championship design and the Undisputed Championship. I've also always had a soft spot for the old Tag Team Championship, the one from the 90s.
Yes, I did as well.
And I don't know why. I think it was the shape of it.
Mm.
It had this interesting shape to it, that the other belts didn't really have. They were a lot more kind of rounded off at the edges, and the tag team belts had this kind of cool design that I really liked. That I think the SmackDown tag titles kind of followed in their design after that. I can't remember what the Raw tag team ones. Maybe they were they were those belts, right? At that
Yeah.
time, whenever they introduced this, those old tag team belts were for Raw, and then SmackDown had their own set of championships, I think.
Mhm.
But I really liked that belt. That was a very nice one. Well, what about you? What's your favorite belt design?
Well, I mean, we've already touched on it, but like the big gold belt, the old WCW, NWA, like World Championship title, I think it's just the best looking title belt that there's ever been, really. Like I look at that, like even as a WWF guy, like growing up and everything, you look at that and it just smacks of world champion, really. And it's weird as well because like I can't really tell what's the design on the front of the belt. Like it, if you look at it from far enough back, it just looks like a load of squiggly mess.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's just something about it where it's, I don't know, it just it looks like a proper world championship belt.
Right. Well, I think that's why people liked it, because when you did see it from far away, you're like, that's just a big gold belt.
Yeah.
Like they really like, if you're wearing that belt, people notice. They're like, whoa, look at that guy. He must mean business because look at his fucking belt. Like it gives off that energy, when you see it, which is really cool. And also whenever you compare it with like every other belt in WCW at the time, stood out a mile.
Yeah.
And again, possibly that's a detriment to the other championships where you're like, this is our important belt, and here's the other ones, because the other ones had a similar kind of design to them, but their heavyweight championship like always stood out and was like, this is what you want,
Yeah.
which is good for a heavyweight championship, for design standpoint, for it to be immediately noticeable and desirable.
Yeah, and memorable as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone remembers that belt as one of the best for a reason. So they
Right.
obviously did their job pretty well when they designed it.
Exactly. That's part of what makes a belt look cool, is its like desirability, for people to go, because that's where you get into wrestling. You want to be the champion, and if you have cool looking belts, people are like, I want that belt. For example, 24/7 championship, without it even being like a garbage idea, the belt on its own looks horrible.
Oh, it looks disgusting.
You're like, why would I want that? Why would I want to add that to my, when you're hanging up, like Steve Austin has all the belts up on his wall that he's won, including apparently the actual Intercontinental Championship that he won off Owen Hart.
Oh, wow.
Apparently that's the actual belt, because he's like, dude, he broke my neck, I'm taking the belt. And Vince, like, it's hard to argue with that. But like he has all his championships up in the background. Like, you don't want to proudly be like, this is my 24/7 championship that I won 86 times. Oh, speaking of this, so I've just remembered this. I saw a video Tommy Dreamer did, and he was showing off some of his belts and his collections, and he showed off this variation of the Hardcore Championship.
Oh, is this the like New York license plate?
Yeah, dude.
Ugh.
And it was sick, man. Sick as fuck. And a part of that's the original belt too. And he was like, he was the guy that got it. It was like, how cool is it to have your own fucking belt?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that. Surely that's a missed opportunity. Tommy Dreamer was the guy that could have revolutionized that hardcore division. Like he came in at the right time, and he didn't really. Like after that, the hardcore division just kind of went into motions for a bit, until they just unified it with the Intercontinental Championship.
Well, wasn't it sort of the time as well where the belt was changing hands constantly? So there's not really a division you could build around one person, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you could have, like, a guy like Tommy Dreamer, though, you could have, because Tommy Dreamer is that kind of hardcore guy where it takes a lot to beat him.
Yeah.
Like Mick Foley, he's a bit of a punishment sponge. So like stories could be written around that and would be justifiable as to why Tommy Dreamer of all people gets his own custom belt. You know, like it could have worked if they'd actually put a fucking storyline behind it. But instead of that, Tommy Dreamer wears his custom belt to the ring like twice, I
Yeah.
think, and then it gets unified with whatever the other. It was either it was it European first, and then they got it integrated into the Intercontinental Championship.
Oh, I can't remember.
I think I don't fucking remember. Anyway, at some point they got rid of all their belts and just turned them into the Intercontinental Championship, which I didn't really dig. But
No.
the point is, Tommy Dreamer had this sweet looking belt, that custom belt, and that's high up on the list, man. That's a pretty looking belt.
Well, there's been some good custom belts, so like the going back to Stone Cold, like the Smoke and Skull belt, that was a really badass design, which was criminally underused as well. Like I'm pretty sure, like not long after he sort of debuted it, it didn't he get injured or something, and then basically he was out for ages, and yeah, like the belt only really got used on TV like a couple of times or something.
Yeah, they didn't really use it on TV that often, as I remember, which is a shame because it was a pretty looking belt.
Mm-hmm.
It was very nice and it fit Steve Austin perfectly, and it worked for his angle. Like him bringing in his own belt worked perfectly for the kind of thing Steve Austin was doing at the time. You
Yeah.
know, I like that kind of stuff. Do you remember? I don't think they ever put it on TV, but The Rock had his Brahma Bull Championship. Was that only in No Mercy?
I get the feeling, yeah. I'm pretty sure it was definitely a belt that they made with the intention of using, but
Yeah,
they just, yeah, I don't think they ever got around to bring it on TV at all.
that was a nice looking belt too.
Yeah, it's not as good as the Smoke and Skull
The
one,
Smoke and
but
Skull one was pretty fucking cool. But the problem with that is like once you start introducing like interesting looking belts for The Rock and Austin, like how how long is it before the Undertaker gets a belt, and then Triple
mm,
H gets a belt, and then like somebody else and somebody else gets a belt, and then after a while you're like, we need to go back to one belt. We're wasting a lot of money buying new championship belts for people who aren't fucking gonna use them. Maybe dial that back a little bit.
well, I mean,
But
they essentially did that with the WWE Championship with John Cena, though, didn't they? Like the whole spinner belt was, that was essentially a custom belt for Cena, like with the whole blinged up kind of gaudy look and yeah, like the spinner as well. Like that was all Cena, and like in theory, when he lost the title, surely it should have reverted to a different design or gone back to what it was previously. But they stuck with that for so long, and I really don't know why, because it was ugly as sin.
yeah, that was a mystifying one. I mean, you could argue that the reason they stuck with it for so long was because it's John Cena's belt, so he's gonna get it back eventually.
Yeah.
Just keep it around because John Cena's gonna end up getting it back soon. I mean, it looks grand on John Cena. It does not look good on anybody else. You
No, I
know,
think Edge did try and put his own spin on it. No pun intended, but like he did like a rated R version, didn't he?
yeah, but it was still the same fucking spinner bullshit, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, why that design? Because yeah, I could see it as a one-off John Cena thing. Ha, that was nice. But like to actually make that your active championship for like 5 years or something, maybe
Mm.
longer.
No, I think it was more like 10 years. It was ages they had that.
Well, they would have brought John Cena he didn't immediately get that belt. Like once he won the championship, it wasn't immediately the spinner belt. So he won it in 95. No, not 95. 2005, right?
Yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
I know they still had that spinner belt in 2010 or 11. Is that the one? Did Punk win that piece of shit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So that was 2011, right?
I've just looked it up. It was retired in 2014,
Oh crap. Well, when did they start it?
2005.
Shut up. I didn't think they straight away. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wait, so like almost 10 years.
that's nuts.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, because then I was like counting from 1995 again. I'm like, no, it's more. Oh wait, no. Um, that's crazy because that's a horrible looking belt.
hmm
Like, can you imagine the Undertaker walking around with that piece of shit?
Yeah, it just would not look right at all.
It looked weird, fucking Randy Orton carrying it.
Yeah.
Because that's not Randy Orton's character. Even Edge, like, sticking an R on top of the spinner, you're like, why didn't you just pull off the spinner bit? If he was a heel, he would have ripped that spinner bit off, right? Or just made a whole fucking other belt.
I don't know. Like, he probably would have got cheered if he did that.
It was a weird time back then, wasn't it? This weird, just incomprehensible time that you could not predict. You're like, but so long as it's anti-Cena, it's probably good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I did not like that belt. I didn't like the spinner idea in general because he did that with the U.S. Championship as well.
Yeah, and that was kind of, I guess, the prototype for the WWE Championship, but it wasn't as bad as the WWE spinner, but like,
Yeah,
it
but at
still
least
wasn't
at
great.
least at least it worked as like you know it's a good way to get heat is to just change the look of a belt on your own discretion.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it like this gaudy piece of shit, like that made sense for like a heel rap star John Cena to
Yeah.
bling out of his championship belt in what he thought was a really cool design, but it actually was really ugly, and that's the joke. Like that works, but that doesn't work if he's a face and he's trying to represent the company as being like legit, and he's walking around with this big fucking shiny ass piece of bullshit. Like that was not a good design move on their
No,
part.
definitely not. But
But
then they've made some like real backwards choices like that before though. Like when they restarted ECW, they they used the old ECW World Championship from back in the day, and
mhm.
that was a great looking title as well with like this sort of kind of barbed wire baseball bats on the front, and like everything about it just kind of made it look made it stand out really. And then they eventually replaced it in WWE with like this really generic silver title, which there was
Yeah,
just nothing about it whatsoever that stood out. It was the most bland title you can imagine.
it was really boring. I remember that. Yeah, but it was really big as well.
Yeah.
It was this really big, like it almost like we said about the big gold belt. Part of the appeal to it was that it was big and it was gold. Like it drew your attention immediately, and it
Mm.
looked like a world heavyweight championship. But for some reason, just making it big and silver didn't have the same effect. It just looked like second rate.
Yeah.
Not as second rate as a fucking spinner belt, but it still looked like odd,
mm.
and especially since that was the only belt on the ECW brand, which really showed you how seriously they took that brand. We'll give them one belt and we'll give it the second ugliest belt we have,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, was never a big fan of that one. The old ECW belt was pretty sweet though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So one we haven't mentioned, which obviously stands out for all the wrong reasons, is the old Divas title with the
Oh, the
whole
butterfly?
the pink butterfly design on the front.
Yeah, wasn't that sweet?
Oh Jesus Christ! It looked like sort of a Barbie accessory or something. It didn't look like it belonged in professional wrestling.
That belt and the spinner belt were clearly designed to be toys first
Yes.
and championship belt second, which is a bad move because, like we said, if it looks like a toy, like why, as a grown man, would you want to walk around with it?
Mhm.
Like they're not sleek and cool looking. They just look cheap and gaudy and horrible. And that Divas Championship definitely kind of suffered from that. It looked like it would sell a shit ton of toys, but it didn't look like the kind of thing that a grown woman would proudly kind of show off to people.
No, it
You know?
was very indicative of like the whole Divas movement, I guess. Like the fact that they weren't really being treated seriously, they weren't allowed to go out and have good matches. It was all like, go out there for 3 minutes and act as a buffer between the matches that people want to see. Essentially, that was WWE's philosophy towards like the women's division back then. So it kind of makes sense in a way that they go for a design which is all about like the most, I don't know, like the garish kind of pinks and diamonds or whatever jewelry is on the front of it. It's all aesthetic rather than any substance behind it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like those old belts were like the prototype for the belts we have now. Because like we said earlier, the heavyweight championships and the women championships we have now in the WWE, they still look kind of nice and sleek and kind of professional, but there also is like this element of the gaudy like diamonds to it, and there's a bit like there's a brightness to them. So like this seems to be the proper in between like a real championship belt and a real toy. And the spinner belts and the old Divas championship, the butterfly, that was one extreme. That was too much like a child's toy. Whereas something like the big gold belt, that was the other extreme. That was too much like an actual championship.
Yeah.
I feel like now they've found the right balance for their championships to make them look, because this is just money making 101. Now they look appealing to belt collectors and people who will spend, 3 figures buying belts, who wouldn't have spent that money on a shitty looking spinner belt. But it also totally appeals to those people who go into Tesco's and buy a little plastic belt for $20.
Yeah.
It's just smart marketing. And it definitely would have turned hardcore wrestling fans like that and like us off the product in 2010. Whenever you see what they're fighting for, like they look like toys, it wasn't interesting. But now that there is a wrestling boom or a wrestling bubble, or more focus on that shit, they have decent looking belts to try and appeal to a different demographic.
Yeah.
Is there any other belts that you that stand out that you like or dislike? Or what about All Elite Wrestling and their fucking TNT belt that isn't finished?
Well, yeah, that one, it's hard to judge because it's not finished really. I mean, it does seem a bit weird that you debut a championship when the title isn't ready, but I guess with everything that's gone on in the world, like you can kind of understand it, but even still, it looks more like a sort of McDonald's belt or something.
Well, okay. Well, all right. That one's not quite finished yet. We'll cut that little bit of slack. What about the FTW belt that definitely is finished? What a great idea and design this is by All Elite Wrestling. Isn't that fun and unique? A new wrestling belt. FTW. That sounds like this could go all sorts of ways. Wonder what it stands for, etc. A whole new belt. What a great lineage that the belt probably had before this, and will continue to have with Brian Cage as champion. It's in orange, which of course ties into Brian Cage and his love of orange. He's always wearing orange to the ring. Plays heavily in his kind of look and his aesthetic. What do you think of that belt?
I think it's a waste of fucking time. Like, I don't really get the idea of bringing it back in the first place because it's like, wow, it's a bullshit title that Taz made up because he wasn't getting a title shot back in ECW in the '98 or whatever it was, and
Mm.
it's only actually had like 2 different champions as well.
With
Because
three.
oh wow, 3 now, but I
Hmm.
mean, Jesus, it's not even as if it's like that cooler looking belt either.
Hmm.
It's just, especially because it's the original version of this belt, which has been, sat in Taz's basement probably for the
Oh, that
past 20 years.
you know that guy's shining it up every day.
Yeah, but
One of these days, baby, you're gonna be back on the time.
you can see there's like lots of little nicks and like scuff marks on it and stuff, and it just looks like a piece of shit.
Yeah, this well, here's the thing, man. Like that belt, like you said, it's the original belt because it was a child of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It had a function, it had a purpose, and that purpose wasn't to be an actual wrestling belt. It was, people say that the belts are often props in wrestling, which is exactly what they are. Like that's half the reason why a lot of the fights happen. You need that prop for the stage show to work.
Mm.
But that belt out of, that and like the $1 million belt are the epitome of props in pro wrestling because their only existence is to make their owner seem like a champion without the esteem of winning the championship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They have a certain point, they have a certain role to play and a certain key point in time, and trying to replicate that after the fact is not going to work. Case in point, how many times did they do the $1 million belt after the first time?
Yeah,
And it's not going to work. They tried it with Steve Austin, I believe, right?
they tried it with Steve Austin. They tried it with Ted DiBiase
DiBiase
Jr.
Jr.
Yeah.
Didn't work either time because it was a product of its time, and it can't work again because it was never supposed to work more than once. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing with the FTW championship. It worked perfectly for Taz because that perfectly worked into the storyline he was working with. Shane Douglas was like he couldn't get a shot at Shane Douglas, and everybody knew Taz was the guy. But Shane Douglas, being a slippery heel, would always slip away from him. So Taz was like, "Well, I don't need your belt because I have my own belt," which it was in an effort to legitimize Taz, but it also happened in the middle of this storyline.
Yeah.
And his work with Sabu was a offshoot of that. It was still to keep Taz important while also making Shane Douglas look like this unstoppable heel champion. It had a time and place, and you can't replicate that, especially now because it doesn't seem like there's any fucking reason to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's already got a title match.
Yeah. In like
What the
this
fuck?
week as well. So
He already won the fucking thing that automatically grants him a championship match, so he's a winner. And he's about to fight for the heavyweight championship, so he's legit. And why would you introduce this belt like right now? Like what the fuck? You know? See, by the way, did you see how I was able to turn a podcast about belts into slagging off all of the wrestling? I'm a fucking pro. But like, I don't know whenever we're gonna get a chance to say this again. So I'm like, I think it's a silly idea. I
Mm-hmm.
think All Elite Wrestling, they really need to fucking figure their shit out.
What do you think of their heavyweight title?
I was just about to say that I cannot even remember what it looks like, so I'm gonna look it up real quick.
It's
Oh,
kind of almost like a boxing belt, like in terms of how sort of wide it is, like into
oh yeah,
it's got all these like side plates which are really bunched up close to the center plate, and yeah, it's just like a really weird looking wrestling belt.
yeah, it's very strange, but again, it's very big and in your face and extravagant. It
Mm,
feels like it's trying to go down the route of the big gold belt without being so oblique about it.
yeah.
Um, but I feel like that's the idea they're going for. The kind of like, look at how extravagant this is. It's a real heavyweight championship,
Mm,
which it's a hard thing to pull off whenever John Moxley's your champion. Now that's not a knock on Moxley at all, but like, it's the same thing with like Austin bringing in his Smoke and Skull belt. because that suited his attitude more than that prestigious championship that he was holding, worn around the waist of like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair and like people who are traditional wrestlers. Steve Austin was a different character, and having his own belt suited him better than holding on to this very fancy looking championship that he wasn't defending with the same kind of honor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and well, I think also as well because Austin was sort of anti-authority, and like that was him sort of, flipping the bird at Vince McMahon by not wearing his championship, but creating his own sort of thing.
Exactly, like he's carving his own path, and so he's not going to rest on the laurels of the older generation. He's got his own belt, which works with his character. Moxie's the same kind of guy. If he's wearing that, well, he's not wearing the belt around his waist, but like if he were, you wouldn't go, no, that's a classy looking champion, because he's Jon Moxley. The way he presents himself and carries himself, he doesn't look like a Ric Flair, for example, wearing a big gold belt.
Yeah.
It has a different energy to it. And so if he's like carrying it around, and throwing it around like he does, it doesn't look so good for the championship.
Yeah,
if you know where I'm coming from when I say
Indeed.
that. I'm not knocking Moxley at all. I fucking love Moxley. But yeah, let me real quick look at their tag team championships too, because I forgot what they look like.
They're pretty standard looking, really. I'd say they're something about them which is, I don't know, it reminds me of almost like old school TNA or WCW, like.
They look a little bit like the light heavyweight championship.
Yeah.
If you remember what the light heavyweight championship looked, I believe it was the light heavyweight championship I'm thinking of. They look like the same kind of color scheme, same kind of shape. They have this. They also look a little bit like the WCW tag team championships.
They're pretty decent looking though.
They're all right, I gotta say. I do like those belts. Those are nice. Yeah. All right, we're gonna stop slagging off all of the wrestling for now. And we're gonna finish up. I will be watching this Bruno Sammartino documentary.
Mm-hmm.
On the WWE network that I guess I just had missed. I'd never seen it before. And in the middle of it, you see Triple H talking to Bruno. At like I think 2014 or 15 or something, whenever Bruno was back in the good books of the company.
Yeah.
And Triple H showed him the championship that Sammartino had won all those years ago. The actual proper looking championship, which was super cool.
Oh wow.
It was really cool. And when you look at a belt like that, it looks like a belt. Do you know what I mean? Like, one thing that I noticed about wrestling belts when I started watching wrestling is that like the straps are huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very gaudy looking belt, and it probably is not very effective at keeping your charges up. Whereas back in the day, even boxing, it was the same. They had these sleeker looking belts. They were a little thinner. They weren't quite as big and as wide,
Mm.
And that's the kind of belt that Sammartino was looking at, and that was really nice. That was a really cool thing. But that's a really nice looking belt too. When did he have it? The 60s?
Oh no, I wouldn't have thought it was that early. Like 70s, maybe.
I think the second time Bruno had it was in the 70s. I think the first time was in the 60s.
Okay.
I would, because like I said, I just watched the documentary, so I think I think he won the second one in 73, right? Or am I thinking of?
No, that's right. Yeah.
So the first one must have been sometime in the 60s.
Yeah, that was his first reign.
63.
63 to 71.
Yeah. And then they took it off, and then they're like, actually, fuck, he's really good. Give him the belt back. Yeah, but that's can you see the belt? Can you see that one?
Yep.
Isn't that a nice looking belt?
That's pretty cool looking, yeah.
It's very it's in sharp contrast to the big, shiny, extravagant belts we have now. But there's like a sleekness to it. There's like a little like dignity to it.
Yeah.
That's quite cool. That I really dig. One more thing. just to put a little addendum on this, there was a game of the GameCube called WrestleMania 2002. Oh, well, I think it was called WrestleMania X8, but I remember WrestleManias by their year number and not by their actual number, because I'm an idiot. Apparently, I'm the only one who does this, I guess. But WrestleMania 2002 on the GameCube. Have you ever played that game?
No, never.
It's awful. Not a good game. Like their story mode. Well, no, there's a belt mode, right? And you can create your own belts, which is super cool. And they give you a lot of cool looking belt designs. Like you don't make your belt, but you can pick from I think 50 different unique championship belts. Some of them are unlockable, so you have to like put the time in. Spoiler alert, I didn't, because that game is impossible to put the time into. But it was really cool to see all these like really different belt designs. You know, you had the bigger, sleeker, or the bigger kind of wider designs of modern era, combined with a lot of like smaller, sleeker championships from back in the day. And I thought that looked really, really cool. But like to win the belt, you just fought like 7 matches in a row. Like there's no storyline. It was just like, here's 7 matches. And because the game was so fucking shitty, it would just be like, all right, today's match is Stephanie McMahon in a ladder match. And you're like, what? Why? Why Stephanie McMahon? Why is it a ladder match? Like this is match 4 out of 7 for this championship. Why is it a ladder match now? Like it was that kind of game. It was not good. Maybe we'll fucking talk about wrestling games in a future show.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one, because there's a new one coming out soon. Retromania.
Oh, yeah.
That I really want to get. I think it comes out. It might be already out. It's out in July, I think. And apparently that's got some old school controls in it, which I dig. But also it's got the Blue Meanie in it, which I very much dig. So I really want to play that game. And I've also, as I imagine you have, probably played some pretty not good wrestling games as well in the past.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So that could be something we could do. Hey, let us know in the comments if you want to hear us do that. Or if you want to hear us do another one about championship belts, because there's still some stuff that we could kind of discuss in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's plenty more room for discussion on this. I think anybody who's listening, make sure let us know what your favorite championships are. There's some really sleek ones out there. And yeah, is there anything else you want to say about the old championships before we wrap this one up?
Not really. No, I think we've covered some of the classics that obviously look the best and stand out the most, and we've covered some of the worst belts that they've come up with in recent years, and well, not just in recent years, but
ever
going back. Yeah. So yeah, I think we've been pretty comprehensive about this.
Real quick, I want to mention that Jeff Hardy belt in TNA, because I feel like we shouldn't close the door before we call out that monstrosity.
Yeah, that's true.
Not a good looking belt. It looked really cheap. It looked really strange. Which maybe that's the idea. Like Jeff Hardy was going through that dark artistic phase where he was an artist and he did his own theme music, and that totally didn't suck. And he was all crazy and dark and shit. So they gave him this belt, which was supposed to represent Judas, I believe, with the double face.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, there was the 2 halves of the same face. Is supposed, it's like a 2-face. Jeff Hardy's a good guy, but he's a bad guy. It's supposed to be,
okay.
That I believe that was the angle. But it just looked like shit. It was a really terrible looking belt. I'm gonna put that one up too. It looked like the scary mask in Super Mario Brothers 2, whenever you took a key and you had to get the key to the door, and then a scary face mask would chase after you. Remember this?
That rings a bell, yeah.
It was the scariest fucking, as a kid, if you're playing Super Mario 2 for the first time, you're like, what the fuck? This fucking mask just turns up, and its face is kind of split into 2, with slightly different colors on each side, and that's what this Jeff Hardy belt always reminded me of. And then I'm like, well, why would I watch TNA when I could play Super Mario Brothers 2? Which is a really good game. I don't like people slagging it off. It's a great game. You know, it's just as worthy. It doesn't matter that it was Doki Doki Panic. It's still Mario Brothers. Still a good game, all right? That's the game that gave us Shy Guys. So it's a true Mario game, all right? And I won't hear another bad word about Super Mario Brothers 2, all right? Fed up. That's the only reason we did this podcast, not to talk about belts, but to justify Super Mario Brothers 2 because it was a good game. Anyway.
Wow, this is taking a bit of a turn.
All right, we wrap things up, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Let us know what your favorite championships are. Let us know how much you love Super Mario Brothers 2. And we will be back next week with our review on Backlash, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to this one.
You guys are going to want to stick around for that because we already have feelings on it and we haven't even seen the show yet. So stick around for that, subscribe and all that fun stuff. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. So goodbye. Thanks for listening. We love you. Wear a mask.